Next up in the Heat Check Scouting Report series is big guard Kasparas Jakucionis, who hails from Vilnius, Lithuania. Having played with FC Barcelona previously, he's one of the earliest prospects to forego the traditional European route, instead signing on as a 5-star to play a collegiate season with Illinois, where he helped the Illini to a decent season and 1 tournament win. Standing at 6'6", he averaged 15 points, a solid 5.7 rebounds and 4.7 assists, while shooting 44% overall, 32% from 3, and 85% from the free throw line. He'll be just over 19 on draft night. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one draft prospect and grade them on what I believe to be the most generally important skills and aspects of their game: athleticism, scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, and overall feel for the game. After those 5, I'll grade one additional skill relative to that prospect that I think is going to have the biggest effect on their stock. That will be deemed the swing skill. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart, with ranges from freezing all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final overall score. Starting with Jakucionis' athleticism, I've graded him as cool. This is likely the single most limiting aspect of his overall game, though his frame and a few sneakier tools make up for it ever so slightly. Jakucionis is listed at 6'6". I'm guessing he'll come in just a hair under that at the combine, but he does have some bulk already and stands to add more. He has a reported but unconfirmed 6'7.5" wingspan, which would make some sense given his production in certain areas. Kasparas is extremely limited vertically, posting just 1 dunk all season with Illinois, and it's something that rears its head as he's a player who likes getting downhill and attacking the ring. In terms of his horizontal athleticism, Jakucionis is a bit of a mixed bag. There's zero pure explosiveness to any of his movement, but he's extremely fluid and smooth and has had flashes of some decent lateral quickness that can show up on both offense or defense. The most intriguing aspect of his athleticism are these effective but seldom speed boosts he gets when he sees a lane and carves it out. He can be deceptively quick in getting downhill, but for every one of these, there's plenty more of him getting stifled at the point of attack. Generally speaking, I'm a fan of this smooth, balanced coordination, but the jump to the bigger, faster, stronger NBA could prove a tough one initially. For Jakucionis scoring, I've gone with the hot grade. This is somewhat of a projection on my end, as his offensive game with Illinois looked somewhat like it was flatlining near the end of the season, but I'm ultimately pretty bullish on his long-term outcome given some of the indicators. Across his 33 games, Kasparas averaged 15 points on 44% shooting on the dot, cashing in on just 32% of over 5 attempted 3-pointers per game, as well as 85% of over 5 free throws attempted per game. He finished with a 59% true shooting on the season and a solid OBPM of 4. Archetypally, Jakucionis is an offensive playmaker, a lead guard designed to make things happen, be that through scoring the rock himself, or creating advantages for his teammates and seeking them out with high-level passing. With that being the case, his scoring package offered a pretty great blend of all 3 levels, albeit with some highs and lows in each. Jakucionis was at his most effective and efficient at the rim, scoring 45% of his points on field goals there. Despite his athletic limitations, he showed impeccable touch in converting 64% of his layups, using his broad frame and keen instincts to see the ball through. The other half of his points came via jumpers, where he sprinkled in plenty of variety: 33% on all jumpers, 32% on a whopping 151 dribble jumpers, and 35% catch and shoot, just under 40% on unguarded shots. With his more limited athletic tools, Jakucionis was primarily used in the pick and roll, a massive 203 possessions with the Illini, and he cashed in on a solid 42% in those actions. This is where you can see a bit of the potential stardom in his game. He plays with immense feel, craft, pace, rhythm. Any buzzword you can think up to describe his prowess in the PNR likely fits. He's got a creativity in creating looks for himself, be it slicing to the rim when gaps open, or magnetizing into space for pro-level jumpers. Another point to Jakucionis' higher end potential was his .50 free throw rate. He got to the line an absurd amount and converted with elite consistency. He doesn't avoid contact and has a legit knack for foul generating, a potentially elite skill given I think his frame is set to hold up well in the NBA. He scored the rest of his points spotting up, in transition, and most importantly in isolation. I'm going to cover Jakucionis' shooting as quickly as possible here. I'd thought about making it his swing skill, but it's ultimately ultimately something I trust enough that I don't think poor splits have a drastic negative effect on his stock. His point-blank three-point shooting percentage is low, just under 32% on the year, but a look at the pure volume as well as the exceptionally hard shot diet is cause for excitement around this area. A mind-blowing 70% of Kasparas Jakucionis' three-point attempts this year were off the dribble, and he converted a solid 31% of those. While his numbers on catch and shoot were impeccable, he also just wasn't doing it that much. And I think just given his great shot form, elite free throw conversion, and his 40% mark pre-forearm injury, he'll be a solid perimeter threat. Ultimately, Jakucionis has a star-infused scoring package that I'm willing to bet on, despite some limitations and plenty of kinks to be worked out. For Jakucionis' defense, I've gone with cool. This certainly isn't an area he necessarily hangs his hat on, but his physical tools give him a slightly higher floor than most Euro-style guards. Through his 33 games, he nabbed just under 1 steal and issued 0.3 blocks per game, finishing with a solid defensive box plus-minus of 2.6. With his lack of pure explosiveness and premier agility, defending on the ball can offer its challenges for Jakucionis, especially in navigating ball screens with great consistency. But his smoother, fluid movement and bulkier frame somewhat evens out the playing field occasionally. He's not the handsiest defender, but he's got quick feet, he can chest up and slide with decent consistency. Off the ball, he remains pretty attentive, he's solid at poking and prodding the ball away from unwary handlers, and he can be pretty advantageous in playing passing lanes. The problem being he's somewhat positionally pigeonholed, unable to really hang with lightning fast guards, but also unable to size up to true wings either. His welcoming of contact and physicality doesn't quite seem to transfer over here, and he can be prone to some similar sloppiness. Ultimately, I don't think Jakucionis will be any sort of high impact defender, but he won't land near the liability tier either on defense, which is perfectly acceptable given his offensive impact. For Kasparas' passing and playmaking, I've gone with hot. I think he'll be a more than capable passer playmaker at the next level, but I'd like to see higher highs and certainly more consistency in this area before I roll out the red carpet. Across 33 games with the Illini, Jakucionis dished 156 total assists to 123 turnovers, good for 4.7 to 3.7 per game for a 1.2 assist to turnover ratio. He had a 26 assist percentage, hovering just under projectable lead NBA guard range, with an unfortunate 22% turnover rate. Jakucionis was indeed Illinois' lead playmaking guard as a freshman. Not an easy thing to accomplish as a young player in Brad Underwood's system, but his handle allowed him to cruise around and pass and playmake at a great rate. Similarly to his scoring, he did plenty of his passing out of the pick and roll, quickly processing reads and feeding that information in the form of easy points for his teammates. For the most part, his passing game at Illinois was incredibly simple. There's only a handful of plays out of a ton that really jump out to me as eye-popping, but even so, I'm not sure a player making 5 assists per game look easy is such a bad thing. He's great, albeit not flashy passing out of the live dribble, but he has a great variety in those situations. His start-stop, herky-jerky movement allows him to open windows that otherwise would be closed, and while he doesn't have one-of-one accuracy, he can hit his targets with consistency and put some great zip on the ball. The other element here was his 3.7 turnovers per game, a pretty ugly mark. The biggest chunk of these were indeed handle-based, but an unignorable amount were also forcing things and most simply some pretty boneheaded plays. I typically don't massively fault prospects for experimenting or leaning into creativity, but for the latter half of the season, he missed on the more overzealous stuff pretty consistently, seeing over 4 per game in his last 17 contests and finishing his career out with 6 in each of his last 4 games. Quite honestly, based on the numbers and EuroLeague background, I expected to be a little more blown away with Jakucionis' passing, and I think that lack of late season flash can be attributed to a variety of things: fatigue, increased competition, the forearm injury, and perhaps even being somewhat limited experimentally in Underwood's really good system. Ultimately though, I feel secure enough in Jakucionis' ability to make easy plays, wear out the pick and roll, and clean up the higher end mistakes over time, especially in the free-flowing, spaced out NBA. For Jakucionis' unquantifiable feel for the game, I've gone with hot. I'd certainly categorize him as a high feel player, though he's one that will certainly need a few seasons of development in order to reach his ceiling. Jakucionis is an orchestral maestro in navigating the floor, be it getting into his own fluid jumpers or creating for others. And I really think more often than not, his process and natural instincts are aware of the right play to make, even if that's not always what happens. I think there's a variety of still improvable areas for Jakucionis, which is a great thing given I'm already keen to bet on his combination of self-created shooting and passing, as well as some positive connective tendencies. Ultimately, there's plenty to like and dislike in regards to Jakucionis' offensive package, but in order to produce the way he did at Illinois, it was absolutely critical that he had the ball and ran plenty of offense. I'm personally bullish on Jakucionis' high-end flashes becoming consistent, but I think there's a world where his athletic limitations or continued turnovers could keep teams away from making him their starting point guard, a really coveted spot as far as roster composition goes. And in the event that's the case, it begs the question, does his skill set allow him to be positionally fluid and play alongside another lead guard, opposed to being just the backup point guard? And I think the answer to that question is a resounding yes. I think Jakucionis will be fairly malleable in terms of playing the 1 through 3. If you need him to bring the ball up the floor and initiate offense, he's your guy. Need him to knock down catch and shoot shots in moderation and add ancillary passing and creation at the 2 or 3, I think that'll be on the table. I'm not so illusory that I think he'll be some massive effective 2 guard capable of torching the nets for the long haul. Jakucionis will of course be at his best with the ball in hand, but in the increasingly positionless NBA, I do think Jakucionis will be able to wear a variety of hats, which is an added club in his bag. The grade. I've gone with the grade of 8.4 for Kasparas Jakucionis. This will likely land me higher than the consensus. While he's had his fair share of issues as a true freshman, I'm ultimately too big a fan of his process and style to shy away from him in the top 10, and potentially even in the back half of my personal top 5. There's plenty of refining to be done to Jakucionis' game. There's some general sloppiness on both ends, his turnovers offer a problem, and the outside splits need a boost. But on the flip side, if he's able to carry over his efficiency finishing at the rim, tap into his blossoming creative mid-range game with consistency, and find dependable passing and shooting, you've got yourself a potential star, or at the very least, a highly impactful, malleable jumbo guard. And the difference in these outcomes could very well be an organization ready to pour into him and reinforce good habits as their floor general of the future. For a player that took a massive gamble in leaving Europe to hone his game in America, I'm prone to believing he's going to get much better in the future, and certainly will be a player worth chancing it on at the 2025 draft. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think of Kasparas Jakucionis, what you grade him, where you draft him, drop who you want to see in the next heat check, and we'll see you next time.